Welcome to 33 North, 83 West, the podcast built for the alumni, fans, and families of the University of Georgia. Hosted by UGA alum Tara Shaw. Go Dogs! You know where to find them. 33 North, 83 West.
Welcome back to our third and final segment, Curated by the South. And I am so honored to have as my guest Coach Vince Dooley. He needs no introduction, but Coach Dooley was the head football coach, as we all know, from 1963 to 1989. He was also the director of athletics from 1979 through 2004. And during his tenure, as we all know, he won a national championship in 1980, also 6 SEC championships. And as athletic director, he built Georgia into one of the most successful programs in America. While working as athletic director, he won 23 national championships throughout Georgia teams and 78 SEC team championships. So it's no wonder he was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 1994. Off the field, he has added another accolade to his very long list of achievements as an author. And his books range from football all the way to gardening. Coach Dooley, thank you so much for being here with us. How are you today?
Well, I'm excited about it. It's been quite a while ago that I was in San Diego, and I have a grandson that was there, which brought us there on 2 occasions, but I was also there as a member of the American Football Coaches Association. We had our convention there, and I was also there visiting some alumni that once lived in San Diego that are now back in Atlanta.
Well, we do have approximately 900 alumni in San Diego County and Imperial County combined.
That's amazing when you told me that. And the great news is that you're president of the Bulldog Club.
I am.
That's quite a chore. 900 families of Georgia Bulldogs out in San Diego.
Right. I mean, I wish they would all come out to every event, but we do get some game watching parties. We'll get up to 300 people. Like, you can't even move in the bar. And considering we are literally all the way across the country, I find that to be quite impressive. And it just shows you, how, the type of fans and alums Georgia alum really are. So it's pretty exciting. We actually have an event coming up. We're going to the Braves Padres game. So on Sunday as a group, so it'll be pretty fun for all of the Bulldog Club here.
Great. Well, I'm anxious to get back out there.
You are invited anytime.
In my closing days.
Well, we hope you have many, many, many more days, please. And we want you to come out to San Diego. We would gladly host you. I think if you were here, I could probably persuade all 900 to show up.
Well, I will do it. We'll have a date. Just all we need to do is get the date set.
Well, I'm going to hold you to it. So just wait.
Right.
Okay. Well, I want us to kick off. I know most interviews start off with football, but what I find really interesting is you've picked up a hobby that's really turned into a passion over the years, and that's in gardening. So after retiring as athletic director, and you sort of embarked on this endeavor for gardening, what piqued your curiosity to even begin with gardening and horticulture?
Well, one of the great things about living around a university, and the University of Georgia in particular, that if you got a curiosity about anything, you can satisfy it because there's an expert on everything.
There is.
So I've always enjoyed auditing courses, even when I was coaching, not during the season, but in the off season. In history. I really enjoy history. I got a master's in history, and in courses in leadership, anything that would kind of stimulate me for the next football season. And then I got curious. I would travel all over Europe, and I'd see all these museums, and I was wondering what I was seeing. So I came back and took a course in art history.
Oh.
So anything that you had a curiosity about, I would take a course. Well, I was always curious about trees and plants. What is that? Why does that turn colors? So I thought I'd take a course on a fellow named Michael Durr. And we had at Georgia in horticulture 2 great superstars at the same time, Michael Durr and Alan Armitage. So I got involved with them, And I just thought I'd take one course and that would be it. But one course led to another. I got bit by the horticulture
You're
bug,
hooked.
and I'm still can't satisfy that craving. So that got me started. And my daddy always said, if anything that's worth doing is worth doing well. So I guess maybe I'm carrying that to the extreme in gardening, because I just keep trying to find plants, and somebody has nabbed me as a collector. And I do have a wide variety of plants, thanks primarily to Michael Durr, the horticultural guru of woody plants and trees.
Well, you don't just collect plants, or flowers. My understanding is that you now have your own variety of flowers that you have either inspired or created.
Well, I do have some plants that are named after me. I wish that I could say that I was a botanist and had really hybridized all these plants. But Dr. Durr found the Dooley hydrangea that's been in our yard for 35 or 40 years. And he noticed that in 2 late freezes, that it was the only hydrangea that continued to bloom. Well, because of its cold-heartedness, he named it Dooley. So it's Dooley. Really, my wife should be part of it, because she was the one that he got the first hydrangeas. And then there's a camellia that's named after me, and primarily because on the camellia board, and the national board is in Fort Valley, Georgia. And so 2 big Georgia fans are on that board. And when they found out I had an interest in plants and camellias, then they found a big red, and of course it had to be red,
yes,
hydrangea. And so it's called the Vince Dooley hydrangea.
And we are very particular about our red. So that's a pretty bright red.
That is a beautiful red. It is magnificent, really is.
Now, in doing my research, my due diligence, I did call up a fellow Georgia alum in San Diego who he works in the corporate offices for one of the big plant businesses. And I said, can you get me a Dooley hydrangea? I need it in time for my interview. And he said he was going to try, but unfortunately did not arrive today. But I have one on the way.
Good. Well, there's up in Long Island, New York, there's a director of an arboretum up there. His name is Vinny Simone.
Vinny Simone.
He got his horticultural degree here at Georgia. And he said that the best hydrangea that he has in his arboretum is called Planting Fields Arboretum, one of the great ones in the country. And he said that the Dooley hydrangea is best. Now, he's probably partial, I'm sure of that. And it's also the cold-heartedness that makes it a very good hydrangea for him.
Okay. Do you think that your past as a coach and a leader gave you any guidance on how to become a master gardener, such as patience, strategizing, knowing the right ones to pick and cut, for example?
Well, I'm kind of a collector, so any plant I don't have, I try to have. But I enjoy, there's a great deal of satisfaction. In fact, I was in the yard this morning. I went out, I'd been gone a week up at Lake Burton in North Georgia, where all of our family gets together for a week. So all you got to do is have 1 week away from the garden and it starts to have problems. So I addressed those problems today, and at noontime when I came in, I had a good feeling about myself because I cleaned up some things in the garden, straightened some things out, and tried to find spaces, which is hard to do now in my garden, for whatever plant that I get next.
Well, I'm in California. As you know, it's a dry heat here. We tend to have very low annual rainfall, regular water shortages, but we do have sunny skies throughout the day, but a bit of a breezy night. For all of us Georgia alumni in California who want an expert tip are making a beautiful garden given our conditions, what advice would you give us?
Now, that's a pretty broad question, but I will tell you what, you can use the old Google and you can find out exactly what you need to do. We were in California just a couple of weeks ago when Billy Payne was inducted at Pebble Beach into the Golf Hall of Fame.
That's amazing.
And while we were there, we went up to see Terry Hoag. Now, Terry Hoag was the All-American with Herschel Walker on that championship team, and also in the early 80s when we had such a great run of championship games in the SEC. So he started a winery called the Hogue Winery, wonderful Hogue. The first one is called the Hedge, named after our hedge and his experience. It's a wonderful Shiraz. Well, all along that valley, from Paso Robles all the way up to San Francisco, you can grow anything. I've never seen so much fruit, vegetables, and whatever. So I'd say Google, because California is a long state. So you've got North California, Southern California, and just Google your particular area, and you'll find out you can grow a lot of things.
I did not know about the having a Georgia alum owning a winery, and I love going to the wineries, especially the ones in Paso Robles, because that is literally some of the best wine you'll ever have is in that area.
Well, then you ought to visit Terry Hogue.
I am now.
He was a two-time academic All-American, two-time consensus All-American like Herschel, and also played 13 years of pro ball. He was a 3.85 student in genetics and is using that background to get into the grape industry.
Amazing. That's next on my list, to be honest. I love wine tasting. I also enjoy golfing. I'm not very good at it, but I do go quite often. And one thing that I found interesting is that the tees and fairways at Augusta National have Bermuda grass. And notably, scientists at the University of Georgia developed what was once thought of as the unthinkable, a shade-tolerant Bermuda grass. Why is shade-tolerant Bermuda grass necessary?
Well, it goes all the way back to Dr. Burton, who was from Tifton, Georgia. We have the Tifton campus that this year was 100 years old, and that's the agriculture campus. And Dr. Burton was world famous. He passed away several years ago, but he had a commendation from President Eisenhower because what he did in the development of hybrids, went over to Japan and brought back some and mixed it with our southern grasses and came up what's known as TIF 419, which is the preferred TIF for all of the stadiums. It is at the University of Georgia, and a lot of other stadiums in the south of the Mason-Dixon line. But now it's Dr. Hanna that took that turf, because they've always been looking, always researching, trying to find something in that Bermuda glass. And it's called TIF because of the Tifton campus, that it's now called TIF 4. And it's just hit on the market, but the masters evidently must have gotten it a year before it came out on the market, because you're right, they used it this year.
Yes. Well, you definitely are the expert, it sounds like, in not only flowers, but now grass. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. In your experience as both a legendary coach and a master gardener, have you found any parallels between the nurturing of a great garden and the building of a championship team?
Well, I guess you could draw any kind of parallel, and there are some. There's a satisfaction that you've done a good job and you've done a best, and that's reflected in what your garden looks like. So I do take pride in that. I want it to look good. I have a lot of visitors, a lot of people from garden clubs all over the state of Georgia and other places that have come to visit my garden. And so if you're going to have that, then you want to put out a great product. And so the same is true with the developing a football team. You can imagine at the end of the season, I understand that Frank Ross introduced me.
He did.
Well, he is the ultimate captain, and he and that team still has a point of pride that no other Georgia team has ever had, and that is to be the only undisputed national champions, which they are. And Frank Ross was the best captain in the 25 years, and I've had some great captains. And he still keeps that team very, very close together. and we're looking forward to seeing them again in the not too near future as soon as football season starts. But there is that satisfaction of putting out a good product. Now, so much of that depends on in fact, most of it depends upon the players as opposed just to the coaching. I'd like to think that we do a good job in coaching, but we also are realistic enough to know that it's the football players that make the team.
Well, speaking of Frank Ross, and hopefully you'll get to see him coming up soon, I believe that he was discussing going to the dedication ceremony. So this fall at the September 7th game against Murray State, the university will be bestowing upon you one of its greatest honors, the kind that will allow your name to live on in perpetuity in the hearts and minds of all the students and fans of Georgia. And that is, they will be naming the field after you. It will now be Dooley Field at Sanford Stadium. Where were you when you first received the news, and what was your initial reaction?
Well, there was a lot of discussion about that for some time. And I think the players periodically would go with petitions to various presidents about naming the field, but nothing ever really happened. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, I thought that maybe one day it would happen, but I might not be around when it happened. So needless to say, I was quite surprised when Greg McGarity, our athletic director, and Dr. Moorhead came driving down my driveway, and I was not surprised to see Greg because he said he wanted to come by to run something by me. But I was surprised when I saw President Moorhead. So they came in the house, and Barbara was in the kitchen, and he said that they have recommended to the Board of Regents that they would name the field after me, so it would be Vince Dooley Field at Sanford Stadium. Of course, I was very moved and shook both the president and Greg's hand. But Barbara, who has a lot more emotions than I do, she started screaming hallelujah, and she started crying, and then she started hugging the president, and she hugged him and hugged Greg and kissed them both. But she didn't kiss me. She forgot about me.
And all of her excitement.
Anyway, that was the setting of what happened.
Well, a little birdie told me that this is not the first field that has been named after you.
Well, in the Agulpa Valley of Honduras, where for the past 6 years I have gone on a mission trip with the Wilderness Team, which is a bunch of people primarily in Atlanta, headed by a PR guy named Bob Hope, who had the greatest wife, the late Susan, a Georgia fan that's ever lived. But I've been down there, and it's a great source. We go down every year for about a week and perform some work. And to see, there's a school down there that they have put a lot of time in, computers, to be able to give some of the Hondurans an opportunity with talent and drive to be able to rise. And they have some have gone on to be doctors, lawyers, teachers, even come back and teaching in that school. Oh, wow. So they had a soccer field out there, and Bob Hope is the one that insisted on being named for me. I was a little embarrassed by that, but nevertheless, it happened. And they brought the president of Honduras to the event. And it was a great celebration because no president had ever been in that very poor valley called the Agulpa Valley. So it was a great celebration, and I'm very proud of it. Thank you.
So if any Georgia alum are in Honduras and they come across a field that says Dooley Field, their first initial thought is this can't be named after Vince Dooley. They would be correct. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You've earned both honors.
Sign, I think the Coca-Cola people gave a sign so they'll recognize Coca-Cola
yes.
first.
They'll see both, yes.
But I doubt if too many people will be going into the Agulpa Valley because it's a very, very poor area.
But you deserve both honors. I mean, you've contributed so much to the University of Georgia, but your contributions are both on and off the field, as like you're saying here in Honduras. About Sanford Stadium, the man who Sanford Stadium was named after in 1929, he figuratively wore big shoes, and I cannot think of a greater person to fill or to stand next to rather than you. Can you tell us about who Sanford Stadium was named after?
Well, it was Dr. Stedman Sanford, who came as an English teacher. He was from Marietta, and while he was there, he became the editor and publisher of the Red and Black, if you can believe it.
Oh, wow.
Because the Red and Black then was an organ of athletics. So he was a great supporter early on of athletics at the University of Georgia. And as a result of that, he was instrumental in building a baseball field, building a basketball arena, a very small arena. And then after getting beat by Georgia Tech, because every year Georgia had to go to Grant Field to play because they had such a great stadium over there in those early years, that our great team of 27, the Dream and Wonder team, was upset by Georgia Tech because they accused Tech of watering the field down. So he was determined that we were going to have a stadium in Georgia. So he comes back, and then in that natural valley, Tanyard Creek, is where the stadium is. And it took him a while because he had to maneuver a lot of things financially, because back in those days, the university couldn't borrow money. Mm-hmm. So they had to have a separate athletic association to borrow the money. And then the next was to convince Yale, the great Yale teams of those days in the 20s, because Georgia had gone to Yale like 5 years in a row, and trying to bring the Yale team that had never been south to Athens for the dedication was quite an achievement.
So I understand. This podcast, as you know, is for alumni, friends, and fans of the University of Georgia. Alumni donations, they've been instrumental in many of the improvements and additions to Sanford Stadium and other buildings throughout campus. And I think you kind of mentioned it, but as a little trivia, I think you already know the answer now, which Ivy League university donated some of the money from their proceeds from the game to pay off the loans that were used to acquire to build the stadium in 1929. And I think you already said it, Yale University, from that one particular game. Apparently, the stadium at that time held 30,000 people. I think now we hold 92,000 people in our stadium. And the tickets were $3 per ticket, is my understanding. And we ended up beating Yale 15-0. And I believe they donated all of the receipts from that game to Georgia to help pay off Sanford Stadium. It's pretty impressive.
Well, not quite. That's
nope,
not quite.
Not
right,
all of it? Oh, okay.
All right. What happened? In order to finance the stadium, which cost a little over $300,000, Dr. Stafford, in order to get a loan, had to guarantee the loan. So 150 people stood up and pledged $1,000 apiece in the event that we couldn't make the payment that we loaned from the bank. As it turned out, they all had 50-yard line seats. So it was a pretty good deal for them because they didn't have to put their 1,000 up. But the last one died. He was from Albany, Georgia, about 1982 when I was here. The last guarantor, as they call them. But they were really important. And the other part of it was that Dr. Stanford offered the Yale president, if he would come, they would split the receipts of the game. But he said, no, we will come and we will give you the same situation you give us that I gave to you when you came to Yale 5 years in a row. And that is, we'll take out all the expenses and then everything else the home team will keep. So we were able to pay for their expenses, and then all the receipts they gave back to us just like they had done for us when we went up there. Okay. So that's the true story.
Well, thank you. Thank you for correcting me. I love history. I like reading about trivia. I understand that you mentioned it earlier that you're a big history buff yourself. One of our other alumni in San Diego told me in the 80s she had actually seen you many times in the halls of the history building. What were some of your favorite history classes?
Well, I took quite a few of them. I very much liked the Civil War, so I took 2 courses under Dr. Emory Thomas, who wrote the latest book on Robert E. Lee. We've got a wonderful history department here. I took one on military history. I took one on political science. And so I've taken several different history courses and still do it. I'm also on the what is now called the American Battlefield Trust. A couple of years ago, it was a Civil War Trust, and that is preserving battlefields in the Civil War. And we did such a great job that they asked us to take on both the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. Oh, wow. So we're very much involved in that. They've saved over 50,000 acres in the last several years. I also was president or chairman of the board of the Georgia Historical Society. I just passed the torch in that. So I am an emeriti president of the Georgia Historical Society. So I've always enjoyed history and spent a lot of time and still take courses, but most of my courses now are firsthand practical courses because I've traveled with Dr. Durr to England on 3 different occasions. I've been to Belgium, and then last in the wintertime, we went to Essen, Germany, which is where the greatest horticulture show in all of Europe is held. And so I'm a continuous learner, which I enjoy doing.
You know, it's interesting because you mentioned you've taken art history classes as well as, history. I do love reading about history, and sometimes I read historical fiction to make it a little bit more entertaining. I understand when you read it, take it with a grain of salt. But I did watch a couple of movies, read a couple of books, and I on a little bit of history from the 1920s. I was over in Spain, and I was in the museum, and there was the war art collection. And I was going through telling my friend all about the war art, and I have never taken a class in it, but it just came because I read all these books on history, and I just kind of put them all together. And I turn around after telling her for like 10 minutes about all this war art, how it started. It's the war art from World War II. And I was explaining to her like how these painters were really important and what, their role in it. And they weren't just painters, back then. And I turned around and there was literally like 6 foreign people behind me going, "Oh, aren't you the tour director of the museum?" I'm like, "Oh no, I'm just telling my friend about war art." So I do enjoy history and art.
Well, there's a lot of war art over the centuries in World War II, World War I, and going all the way back to the Revolutionary War, and then going all the way back to Europe and some of the great wars that took place there, primarily between France and Germany, and France and in England. So there's a lot of great art in the wars as well.
Speaking of, I want to bring the history back over to Athens. So there's a little bit of a debate with regards to the type of hedges that we have at Sanford Stadium. Now, I know the hedges have encircled the stadium since 1929, is my understanding. But presently, there is a little bit of a debate. One source says that the hedges surrounding the field at Sanford Stadium are English privet hedges. Well, another source says, no, they are Chinese privet hedges. Can you, once and for all, help us to resolve this pressing debate?
Well, there's no question about it because I took Dr. Durr, who was the expert on woody plants and trees. They went down to the stadium with other horticulturalists and determined that the hedges are Chinese hedges. Okay. They're old privet hedges, but they're, in our case, the royal privet hedges.
The royal privet.
And they have meant so much to us because we always had a say, and we loved to get them between the hedges. And they're manicured, perfectly kept. And so there's no question that they're old privet hedges, but they're the royal privet hedges. But a lot of schools, it really beautifies and blends in well with the rest of the stadium and the shape of the field. And a lot of schools have adopted our hedge policy using more modern hedges. Normally today you would not go get a hedge of a bunch of privet hedges, but there's none like ours. Remember, we're the royal privet
The hedge. Royal privet hedges.
Exactly. But there's boxwoods and a lot of other hedges that probably are a little bit better than the common privet hedge that the birds drop everywhere, except the royal privet hedges are separate.
Yes. Do you know what the history is, or what was the inspiration behind the hedges to begin with in Athens?
Well, the I think head of the history department, or rather the horticulture department, brought those hedges in, and they were just little bitty hedges, no bigger than about a foot, and they brought them in at night, had no lights. They had to use the lights of a car in order to put them in the night before the game.
And this is 1929. Yes.
But the night before, when they were in there for the ball game. Of course, they were just, again, 1 foot hedges at that time. And there are some pictures of the game that you could barely see the hedges that were just starting to grow.
They were little
but
baby hedges.
Thick now, we took them out for the Olympics.
Yes, in 96.
And this was a blessing in disguise, because a lot of the Georgia people, they're Georgia football purists. They couldn't imagine playing soccer in Sanford Stadium and taking the hedges out. But it was a blessing because they had some nematodes, which was a bad disease. So we took them out, took cuttings of them, and grew them in 2 different places. And then they became hedges too, and they are the sons and the daughters of the original hedge.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Now that we are talking about the field, let's talk about just your take on, this team. I understand that we have the number 2 recruitment class right now for 2019 for the freshman class. What do you foresee for this year?
Well, Kirby Smart was the ideal person to hire, and that's exactly who I would have hired, which I said publicly after Greg McGarity made that decision, which was a great one. And what he's been a part of Alabama, which arguably for the past decade has been the best program in the country, consistently competing at the highest level. And that is hard to do. He's the only one that's been able to do that. And so Kirby knows that you do that by consistently having good recruiting classes. And he is the most focused recruiter that I've ever been around in all of my days in coaching. And because of that, he's off to a great start. In the first 3 years, he's gotten the 2nd highest rated class in the country.
It's amazing.
The next year was the 1st highest rated, and the next year was the 3rd highest rated. And this year, with the early signing, it looks like they're in the top 4 right now.
Amazing.
With the 2/3 of them being signed, still a 1/3 out there left. But nevertheless, at that kind of consistency, I think this is perhaps his best team and complete team. But it's also true, if you're going to win the national championship, that are certain things have got to fall in place. You've got to be free of injuries. The ball has got to bounce right. You've got to have a couple of those breaks during the season that can make a difference, just one play. And so if those things were to happen, they've got a very good chance. There's no doubt in my mind that they'll be competing again at the highest level because of the excellent recruiting that they've done in the last 3 years.
I mean, he's like you were saying, he's had a few seasons as head coach under his belt. He's already collected, like you said, some of the best recruitment classes trip to the national championship game, back-to-back double-digit win seasons. I mean, it's, how much higher is he going to go? I mean, he's pretty amazing, what he's doing. And I've heard from some of the players now that he's really inspirational, motivational. What's your take on, the coaching staff for this season?
Well, he's hired an excellent coaching staff, and he's added to that and adjusted it as some have moved on. He has, again, the experience of being in a lot of places. He starts off with the fact that his father was a high school coach, and so he was sort of born to coach. And he's had great experience here at Georgia as a player. He came back as a coach. He was at Valdosta State. He moved around. He was with Nick Saban, both at LSU and at Miami. And my son, Derek, who also was in the coaching profession, and he were together at both Miami and LSU. And then he went to Alabama. He's been there 9 years. And as I said earlier, that Nick Saban, arguably in the last decade, has been the most consistent football program in the country. Every year competing at the highest level because they've been able to recruit at the highest level. And that is what Kirby has brought here. He's got tremendous energy, and he's got a great ability to relate to players, and he is the most focused recruiting coach that I have ever known. So all of that combines that he's going to be here, I think, a long, long time at the University of Georgia and as our head football coach.
Well, we hope he stays there for a long, long time. I will say this. I asked Frank Ross earlier on the show an interesting question about what was the special sauce that made the 1980 team so successful. And does the team this year have that same special sauce?
Well, you can't predict, but you can analyze when it's all over.
Right.
So it's a lot easier to do that than predict.
Afterwards.
But I think this is a hungry team. I think it has come so close. You've got the great leadership at quarterback, some great running backs, but there's no team that's perfect. You've got some youth in certain places, but the kicking game is good. Defense is good. They've got, I think, all of the ingredients, but again, things have got to bounce right and fall in place. And but there's a lot of optimism about this team, and justifiably so.
Well, thank you so much for your take, and thank you so much for being a guest on our 33 North, 83 West inaugural podcast. I'm so excited to have had this opportunity to speak with you today, and I cannot tell you what a real treat it has been. So thank you.
Well, it's been great. This picture behind us.
Yes, the painting. Yes, tell us about it.
It's by Lamar Dodd, and the art school is named after him.
Yes.
And for 40 years, he was known all over the country and was asked to paint all the space where the space shots were going. He was brought up, and this is one of his space shots of what's going on in the outer space. He also did open heart surgery, and so he's had a reputation all over the country. We had a lot of great professors here, and he was one of 4 or 5 that had a run here of like Glenn Burton that I mentioned, who invented the grass that we talked about earlier.
Yes.
But it's a painting of Lamar Dodd, one of the great artists in the country and in the world.
It's a lovely painting. It's really nice. I'm glad you're able to show it to us.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate it. We are very excited. I know all the listeners are really excited to hear from you, and I'm glad we could talk about some of your passions beyond just the field as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and go Dogs and go Red and Black.
Yes. Oh, yes. I brought my pom-poms. Go Dogs. And we're going to see you in San Diego, right? I can tell the whole alumni chapter.
Yeah, we'll try to work on getting a date.
Yes. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.